So welcome to Secrets to Exam Success. I'm Alicia from the Healthy Campus Unit, and I will be going through the webinar with you today. We're going to start off by just giving a little introduction and telling you a bit about the webinar, and then we'll tell you a bit about all of us. And then we will hear from Dr. Mebby Bell and Dr. Steve Finch. First off, I just want to give a little shout out to those of you in Rutherford Library. So our goals for today are to connect students with services on campus, provide an opportunity to learn about study strategies, and for you to try some relaxation techniques to de-stress and prepare for a good night's rest. First, we will hear from Mebby, and then we'll be hearing from Steve. And at the end, we will have some time to answer your questions for either presenter or any general questions you may have. If you move your mouse to the left side of the screen, you will see a side panel. There is a blue square with the letters Q&A on it. If you click this, a window will appear where you can submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation, and we will be answering them at the end. So, who is the Healthy Campus Unit? The Healthy Campus Unit is a health promotion team of student staff and volunteers and 2 full-time staff members. Our work comes from the understanding that our well-being is directly linked and is essential to student success. We also believe that the environment around us, where we study, work, and live, play an important role in our well-being. We use health promotion strategies to encourage members from all over campus to work together in creating a healthier campus community. Some of the programs that our unit organizes are Unwind Your Mind, Wellness Grants, and Wellness Champions, among others. We also coordinate the National College Health Assessment, which is a survey looking at student health on campus. This Google Hangout is one of the ways we are working with partners across campus to support student well-being. The Google Hangout will be archived and part of Unwind Your Mind. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Unwind Your Mind. Unwind Your Mind focuses on student connection, raises awareness about campus supports, promotes strategies to de-stress, and brings resources to students right on campus. This year we have Wellness Wednesdays, which you may have seen around in the libraries. Every Wednesday we have different activities happening in all the libraries across campus to help you de-stress. We have Woolly Wellness, where you can learn to knit, meal planning, relaxation, and my personal favorite, furry friends. With Unwind Your Mind, we want to promote self-care during stressful times and provide you with the resources for students to actually implement those self-care tips. All right, so first up in our session, we will hear from Dr. Mebby Bell. Mebby is the Associate Director of Learning Resources at the U of A Student Success Center. She works with undergrad and graduate students to help them maximize their study strategies and exam performance. She's going to be telling us how to make the most out of our study time. After that, we will be hearing from Dr. Steve Finch. He is a psychologist and coordinator of training at the U of A's Counselling Clinical Services, where he has provided individual and group therapy as well as supervision to the PhD and master's students, completing internships for the past 14 years. He became a registered yoga teacher in February of 2013 and has developed yoga-based programming, including a yoga therapy group, yoga for mental health and well-being, and 2 free drop-in groups, yoga for peace of mind and yoga for mental hygiene. He's going to show us some different yoga poses that are great for a study break and some poses that will help to calm your mind before bed. All right, so now we will go right into exam prep with Mebby.
Hi everyone, thanks Alicia. If you can't hear us at any time, please type a message in the box wherever you're at and let us know. We are all together, so we want to know if you can't hear us, because we want to make sure you have all the information that we're giving to you today. So as Alicia mentioned, I'm going to go over a bunch of different ways to prepare for exams. There's lots of different approaches. I want to focus on 3 key things today. Figuring out the correct focus for each of your exams, picking active strategies that have a really high impact when you're using them, and breaking your work into manageable chunks. There's lots of different ideas and lots of quick things you can add into what you're already doing. It's not about changing everything that you're doing. What I'd suggest is look for the things that stand out as doable for you, or things that will update or revise what you already like doing. You really don't have to change everything to have a positive impact. Sometimes things are going fine with most of your courses, but there's one class that's just frustrating or annoying, or you're not sure how to get a handle on it. Look for strategies to help in that situation. So the first thing, to be really strategic about your exams, you want to pin down in a lot of detail what you need to do and what you're facing when you go into that exam. The more specific your information is, the more precisely you can focus and tailor your studying. And I know one of the most frustrating things is when you spend a lot of time working on certain sets of material and it isn't on the exam in the end, and you feel like you've wasted your time when you're sitting there in that exam situation. So these are pretty basic, but you want to drill into these in a very polite way with your instructors. So obviously, what is the format of the questions and the number of those questions, and what is the weighting of each kind of format? Especially if you have preferences or you're more comfortable with a certain kind of format, that's worth knowing. The weighting also can help you plan in advance how you want to think about spending your time in the exam. Also, are there materials that you need to prepare or bring? If you're used to bringing in a formula sheet, what kind of formula sheet? Are they providing the formula sheet? Is it your poetry book? If it's something like that, can you have notes on it? What kind of calculator? Every term I meet students who have brought the wrong thing into an exam and they're not allowed to use it. So double check. Even if you think you're sure, double check so you're bringing in the right materials. Usually you have a good sense of what you need to cover, but just really ask specific questions here. So the big one with lectures versus readings, I know it's really annoying when instructors say everything is important, but everything isn't important or your exams would be hundreds of pages long. So try to look at your lecture, look at what your instructor is focusing on, take that as a guide. Ask them for the weighting between lecture material versus readings. Ask them if they say the readings will be a certain proportion, what would they recommend focusing on? Also, in terms of your units and themes or topics that you've been going through in the course, how is that weighted? It's not always equally weighted. The amount of time you spent in class is a good guideline, but just confirm that. The weighting of that can help you also proportionally spend the right amount of time when you're studying. So if there's one unit that is heavily weighted, you'll spend more time on it. In terms of whether your exam is cumulative, especially with finals coming up, ask your instructor exactly what they mean by cumulative. The general rule of thumb is that about 75% of the material will be since the last midterm, but that's just the general guideline. So ask your instructors questions like, will the formats be similar to previous exams? If you have different kinds of question formats, will the units be equally distributed across them? That will also help guide how you prepare. And if you're not sure, ask. Ask as soon as you have questions, even if exams are a few weeks away, your finals now. Your instructors will have at least a general sense, if not a very specific one, of how to answer these questions. So in terms of having really high impact, valuable study sessions, and I know the biggest thing is often boredom, and yet we often fall back on our favorite strategies that have worked for us in the past. Practice questions are very high impact. They get you to manipulate the information, they help you confirm your understandings, which often increases our confidence when we're heading into exams. So I want to go over a few different ways that you could mix things up in terms of testing your own knowledge. Once you know from that previous slide what your question formats are, practice your formats as well as your knowledge. So you're actually practicing how you're going to deal with them in the exam. Also, if you're looking for new sources for questions, look to your textbook, look to the titles on your PowerPoints, turn those into questions. The SU Exam Registry has exams for about half the courses undergrad courses on campus. They're a great resource. And of course, any practice exams. If your professor is giving you practice exams, though, it's worth asking whether they're representative questions for what you're going to face when you go into whichever exam you're preparing for. Often there are really good guidelines, sometimes they're not exactly the same. And create your own questions. And you don't have to spend lots of time writing these out. You can just formulate them in your head or ask them to a study partner. Convert titles, learning objectives in a textbook, or keyword lists from your notes or texts. Convert those into questions. We're really good at asking ourselves the what questions. What is this definition? What is that definition? But to push yourself even more, ask yourself how, why, and what if. As soon as you ask questions that start with those phrases, you're manipulating the information and applying it in a more complex way. They're higher order learning activities. So you'll be really challenging yourself to work with the information in a more complex way. There's one more strategy which might sound a little strange, but it is really valuable. I call it sandwich bag comparison quizzing. This is just basically comparison. And comparison is such a valuable tool that if you just wanted to change one thing, I would recommend asking yourself, how are these concepts similar and different? But to do a sandwich bag comparison, you say have a unit in your psych textbook, and you would get just a bunch of little pieces of paper. They can just be ripped up pieces of paper, and go through that chapter and your lecture notes and write down on the little pieces of paper the keywords or terms or theories or whatever you're working with in that particular set of material. Put all those terms in the sandwich bag. And if you want to do this a lot, label the bag with a Sharpie, chapter 6, psych or whatever. Then you just put your hand in, mix up the piece of paper and draw 2 or 3 of those terms out, look at them, and challenge yourself to talk about how they're similar and different, and get into a lot of really precise detail here. Because the more precise you are, the more accurately you're refining the differences between your concepts. And it's those fine distinctions between concepts that show up on your exams. This is something you just put the piece of paper back in and draw a few more. It also really gives you lots of practice with something that's hard for us to do for ourselves, which is unpredictability. And exams cause us stress because there's a lot of unpredictable things going on. We can't exactly predict what the questions will be. But when you're mixing questions up in terms in a sandwich bag comparison, each time you draw them out, it'll be slightly different. And what that does is it challenges you to move the information around, put different kinds of information together, and come up with unique comparisons. That's the kind of thing, thinking on the spot, that you're expected to do in an exam with complex information. When you're studying along, maybe you have a favorite way to study and you're just getting worn out or you need a change, take a break and try this for 15 minutes. See how it goes. Ask yourself if it felt challenging, if you felt like you were really thinking about the material. That's when you know you're using an active strategy. At the bottom of the slide here, it has some suggestions for other places to pull these from. Any list of key terms, lists of related concepts, theories, definitions. If you have large textbooks, often at the back of those textbook chapters, there's a list of key terms for the chapter. Putting any of those into a sandwich bag and trying this out, or even on little piles on the side of your desk would be useful as well. So when you're actually trying to get down to studying, staying focused, getting through a lot, I know especially at the end of the term, it gets pretty overwhelming. And so I want to go over the points on this last slide to really maximize each session that you have. All of the things that I've previously talked about are active study strategies. Anything where you feel like you're doing something, you're really engaged, is what you're aiming for. If you feel bored, and every single one of us as students feels bored sometimes, you're not actively engaged. You can be sitting and really thinking about your concepts, and you're really actively working with those ideas. But drawing your concepts out, mapping ideas, doing practice questions, doing problem sets if you're in a problem-solving discipline, comparing things, quizzing a classmate, discussing or debating, anything where you feel like you're doing something is the most valuable. And comparison, in whatever form you choose to do it, is one of the most powerful ones. When you're thinking of studying for finals and there's weeks and days of lots of studying ahead of you, that's really overwhelming, and that's one of the things that causes us to procrastinate. So one strategy is to break your work into small manageable pieces. The first thing you can do is set a timer on your phone for 15 minutes and then pick one small task. So you could say, I'm going to do sandwich bag comparison on my psych chapter about abnormal psych for the next 15 minutes. When the timer goes off, take a short break, a short boring break. So you don't want to go away and watch a Netflix episode, but maybe you want to refill your water. And then at the end of the day or the end of your study session, then you get to watch the Netflix episode as your reward for yourself. Or talk to a friend, or go for a run, or do some yoga, or do whatever you find meaningful. One of my colleagues says the best reward is one that's free and meaningful. So it'll be slightly different for each of us. Maybe you want to play Fallout because you just started getting back into it because it came out last week. Whatever it is that really you're interested in, reward all that effort, because it's the effort you put in every day that will get you through the exams. The last thing too is to keep a distraction list, just a piece of paper beside you. As you're thinking of all the things you're trying to study on, these random thoughts pop into our heads, just write them down on the distraction list. Then when your timer goes off after 15 minutes, you can simply look at the list and decide whether there's something you want to take care of now. Sometimes it's just a lot of the junk from the day that you're thinking about. Maybe it's other exams you're worried about, that you have to call someone, send an email, go to the grocery store. You're thinking about what you're going to do on the weekend. We all have those random thoughts. If you have a way to externalize them, but keep track of them, it helps you focus while you're trying to study. And I know we all get bored, as I mentioned, so when that happens, don't try and push through it. Take a break, take a short break or a long break, depending on how exhausted you are. And then when you come back to study, change at least one thing about how you study. So if you're not sure, pick something from what we just talked about. And on that break, do something, get up, move, something to actually physically get away from those books on the table. And I know Steve has a lot of ideas that you can put to work on those breaks too.
Indeed. Okay. So, yeah, that's a nice segue. We'll go for study breaks. So we're looking here at this idea of breaking the cycle of stress and working with rhythms. So this idea of cumulative stress is one that can be really powerful. Not only do we have circadian rhythms that go through the whole 24-hour day, but we have ultradian rhythms that are sort of hour to hour. And they usually are around the 90 to 120 minute mark. And typically, when we respond to these, we tend to break that cycle of cumulative stress and continue to work with our natural rhythms. So we're going to introduce you 2 yoga sequences here that you can use. And if anyone's game, the first one, the study break, shouldn't freak too many people out over in Rutherford there. And then the second one might be a little bit more interesting. But let's start with that study break sequence. So mountain pose is the first pose that we can start with. The reason it's so powerful is that it's very simple. A lot of times no one can even know that you're doing it. You can do it while you're waiting for a bus, in line at the grocery store. And so if you're game, you can start. Just feel your feet. So we start with feeling our feet and moving to the inner and outer edges of the feet. We try to find the mound of the big toe, mound of the little toe, and the center of the back of the heel. We move that energy up and we can engage the thighs, noticing the kneecaps lifting a little bit here. And then we come to the pelvis, and if you notice your tailbone, if you just tuck it forward a little bit, and those sit bones will come in over the heels. The navel comes up and in, so we bring the abdominal muscles in. And here you can take 3 deep breaths. As you inhale, the shoulders come up towards the ears, and as you exhale, the shoulder blades come down the spine. And this is nice because when we're keyboarding, and if we're not in an ergonomically correct workstation, we tend to really cavitate, bring the chest in and the shoulders in, and a lot of times they'll also come up towards the ears. So here we're looking to root the tailbone and let the crown of the head float. So we're getting a lot of length in the spine. Finally, we'll just tuck the chin slightly, so we want to leave a nice long back of the neck. So to do that, we're going to now go to the head drop. This is nice because it'll start opening up the tendons, the ligaments, muscles in the back of the neck. So the chin slowly comes down towards the chest, that bone there called the sternum. And just feel that sensation in the back of the neck. Now, as you raise the head back up, raise the head slowly so that you feel that the length in the cervical spine staying long. So that'll give us that nice mountain pose, solid, stable. And again, it's just bringing you in a kind of a mindful way into your body and starting to help you change the channel from thinking, problem solving, and all the kinds of mental activities that you do when you're studying. Now, the neck does hold a lot of tension, so we'll go from here to working with the neck a little bit. So we go the ear to the shoulder, and we're gazing pretty much straight ahead here. Now there's a very intricate connection between shoulder and arm. So if you want to deepen the stretch, you can just bring the arm out. You can hold that for about 3 breaths. And I haven't talked about the breathing here, but this is key. So just breathing in and out about 3 times for each of these. And then we can bring the head back to neutral and then go to the other side. Once we've done the other side, we can then come back into mountain, and now we're going to bring the chin over to the shoulder. So we're going to get a different set of muscles here. So where before the ear was dropping towards the shoulder, now the chin, and then we'll gaze up and come over to the other side. I don't think there's a name for this pose, so I gave it a shot. If you don't like it, you can call it whatever you like. But that's just opening the neck up, the muscles in the neck, a different set. And now we're ensuring that, we're taking some of that tension out of the neck. You can also do some head rolls where you just roll the head all the way up on an inhale, all the way down on an exhale. Now, part of the struggle with studying, again, is that we bring the shoulders in, the chest cavity sort of cavitates in, and really what we do to counteract this is a heart opener, and this is what this next one is. So here, from mountain, we're still working from that original pose and coming back to it. We're clasping the hands behind our back. We're just letting gravity bring those hands down. You can see the shoulder heads open up, and the heart really opens up here. And this is a really nice counter balance to all of the keyboarding that happens with the arms out front and the shoulders coming in and cavitating. So now we can work a little bit here with the hamstrings. One of the new ideas out there is that sitting is the new smoking. And there are a lot of unhealthy things that start happening when we sit. So one of the things that happens is we take those big muscles at the back of the legs, the hamstrings and the glutes, and we essentially sit on them, we squish them. And so to reactivate them, we're going to do a forward fold. Now, depending on where you're at, you may not get all the way down, so you can start here with halfway lifting. As you do this, we want to have a long spine. You can gaze upward and you can bring the eyes right towards the ceiling to give the muscles in the eyes a little bit of work. And then if you would like to bring it all the way down, the knees bend, the chest comes towards the thighs, and we'll come down as far as we can. You may have, you may be able to then grab opposing shoulders and then bring that full forward fold. Forward fold is a wonderful posture to calm and relax the body, to bring the nervous system into that parasympathetic realm. Because what happens in this pose is first the blood pressure rises a bit, and then there's receptors in the heart and carotid arteries that reset the blood pressure to reduce it in the heart rate. And so from here we can also do this in a seated posture. So if you want to stay seated, if you don't want to, if you want to be more inconspicuous, yeah, you can do that right in your chair. Now, again, with the keyboarding, this idea of carpal tunnel is an important. It's important to respect the strain that comes on the wrists, and so here we can do some wrist circles. And again, we can take a minute or so. The power of yoga is that we bring the breath in. So as you go one way, you can inhale. As you take your circle in an opposite direction, you can exhale. And you can also then take the thumbs and close the fingers around the thumbs, and that'll get a different set of muscles as well. And there's other things you can do for the wrist, but these are a couple of easy and effective strategies. Now this next pose is called seated pigeon. It is going to open up those hips. A lot of times with the sitting, we're going to really put a lot of stress and strain on the hips. The hips tend to tighten up. The hips are a huge joint in the body, and this pose is very nice as a hip opener. So again, you can be rather inconspicuous here. And the idea is to keep the spine long. And hold that for about 3 breaths. One of the most simple and effective poses for the spine. The spine is so important to keep it supple and to keep the space between the discs from shortening. Is we like to go with the cat-cow, and we can do this seated. So you can see here that we're starting with a straight spine. Notice the feet are planted and rooted to the ground. As we inhale, the belly drops, and then we arch the spine. We're looking up. We're trying not to crank the neck back too much stress. We're looking upward, and then on the exhale, we come into seated cat. So now we're bringing the head between the shoulders and getting a nice arch in that back. So we're almost treating this like a wave, and where each of the vertebrae are moving one at a time. And again, a really nice back warm up, spine warm up. So if any of you are doing a few cat-cows, I'll give you a second or two. And if you could only do say 5 poses, if you only learned 5 yoga poses, this would definitely be one of the ones you want to learn. And this can also be done if you're in a tabletop position without the chair, which is more ideal. Okay. Then we have the seated twist. Seated twist is going to do a few things. One is it's going to give us a nice opening in the lower lumbar region of the back. We're also going to get the shoulders, and with the neck, if we peer over the one shoulder, we're also going to get the neck opened. And again, we're going to hold this for 3 breaths. All of these poses, and the essence of yoga is that we are engaging in a mindful activity. Mindfulness is putting our awareness on purpose to what's happening in the present moment without judgment. So these are wonderful opportunities to really connect with the sensation in the body, your breath, to quiet the mind, to quiet the planning, judging, worrying mind, and bring that focus in to the sensations in the breath. Now to work a little bit with the shoulders. Now that we've got the neck opened up and loosened up, we've done some work with the spine, the hips. This is the shoulder hug. Now we're going to give you a couple of options here. What we're primarily concerned with here is opening up the shoulder blades. So noticing the sensation between the shoulder blades as they open and bringing the breath into that area. Now this is eagle. And I know it says bagel, but it is eagle. And we just wanted to see if people were paying attention. This is a new yoga pose. And so here, what we're doing is we're bringing the hands out front, and then we would start with the right, and we inhale our hand up, and then bring the elbows together under, and then the hands come together. Now the back of the hands can come together, or if you find that those shoulder blades are nice and open, you can move it. If that's still not doing it for you, you can help this out. Okay. So, breathing into that space that's opening up between the shoulders. Isn't that nice? Yeah. And we just noticed that we have some folks doing really well. Isn't it great? Okay. So that's the study break. How are we doing for time? We're doing. Let's go into our sleep preparation and restorative sequence. This sequence is really nice because we're doing 2 things here. We're doing inversions and we're doing twists. Inversions are going to be very calming again and help lower the blood pressure, lower the heart rate, and bring the central nervous system into that which is we like to have it. So now, if anyone's game for this, we have to give you time to go over and find a wall. Is there wall space in Rutherford? Who knows? But this will be available so that you can, that you can download it and you can give this a try yourself. So we're really scooching up that glute against the wall here because as we swing the feet up, we want to be fairly close to the wall. So you can see here that we are into legs up the wall pose. This is a wonderful exercise if you've had a long flight to counteract any possible deep vein thrombosis. But what's happening here is we're moving lymphatic fluids. The heart, of course, pumps blood, but we only have a pump for lymphatic fluids. And this is going to move some of those fluids quite nicely. The blood is going to drain into the sacral basin here. And what's wonderful about this pose is you can really surrender onto your mat or into the floor, the shoulders, the muscles up the spine. Gravity's doing all the work here. You can see that the hands can go on the belly, so you can be aware of that diaphragmatic breath. Bring that mindful awareness into the breathing and rhythm of the breath. Here you want to notice your chin. So if the chin is feels like it's really far up, you can gently tuck the chin a little bit to keep the legs in the back of the neck. Pretty good. Sometimes we use little blocks to help with that. So the other option is to bring those arms out. And again, at any time you can bring the soles of the feet into the wall and bring the knees to the chest. That feels a little bit odd as the blood's draining and moving, as the lymph is moving. And these poses are meant to be about 3 to 5 minutes. So as you get more practice with them, to get the full effects. These are yin poses. And so over time, you'll just have a wonderful little restorative 5 minutes of legs up the wall. From here, we go to reclined Cobblers pose. So the soles of the feet come together. The heels just come down towards the floor. We really open up the lower abdomen here so the breath can come deep into the belly. And then we're going to move and get ready for our next posture. Once you've done the previous posture, it's nice to just come into this pose with the knees coming towards the chest and just recalibrate. Here with 3 breaths. Always wanting to stay connected to the breathing. So here's our Recline Pigeon. We did this in the chair, but here we're doing it with on our backs. And this is going to open up the hips. So here we've got the right ankle just below the knee on the thigh. And that's going to really open up. Now, if you look at this, this next slide, how we can calibrate the depth of the stretch is by bringing that foot higher up the wall. So the higher up the wall the foot is, the less deep the stretch. And then as we bring the foot down, we get a deeper stretch. Again, counteracting some of that sitting, that tightness in the hips. Yeah. All right. So recline pigeon. Now we go into reclined twist. Now the other advantage of this restorative sequence is with the twisting. The twisting is also going to move lymphatic fluids, but it's also going to massage and stimulate the internal organs. So when we come, as we are here, over to our left side, we've got the descending colon, we've got the spleen, we have the kidney on that side, bladder. These are all the internal organs are getting a little love here. And as well, the lower lumbar, the lower back is getting a really deep twist. So you may be able to come all the way down. Again, we're letting gravity do the work here. And once you're here, you can then bring the arms out and then gaze over the shoulder, the opposite shoulder that you're from where your feet are. And that's just going to really open up the neck, shoulders. So this is a wonderful restorative pose that is doing so many good things. Again, always the invitation to find the breath. There are a number of pranayama or breath techniques that you can look up. The one I'd recommend is to look up the Yogic 3-part breathing. This is a really powerful and a breath technique that will really recalibrate the nervous system. And you could be doing it as you are going through the poses. So then we just come out of that pose and then into a sitting posture. And here's where you can do some of those, some of that pranayama, some of that breath work to finish off your session. And now you're ready for a wonderfully restorative night's sleep.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve, for that yoga session. That was great. And thanks, Nevi, for your great exam tips. So right now we're going to be answering some of the questions that students have sent in. And Nevi and Steve, if you just want to jump in and answer, feel free. So our first question that we have here is, I find multiple choice exams daunting. They give me anxiety. Are there any specific ways to prepare for multiple choice exams to make me less anxious when taking the exam?
There are lots of different strategies that you can use. I actually think one of the first ones is to breathe, actually, just as you were practicing doing. So anytime you find yourself feeling anxious about the exam, whether you're in that exam room writing or studying or even anticipating the exam, when your prof starts to talk about it in class, take a very deep diaphragmatic breath and start to calm down that way. When you're in the room, I think you need to have a little bit of awareness of what you're telling yourself. So the best thing to do is start thinking about this now when you're not in the exam room. And so what kinds of things do you tell yourself? You want to have something that's productive, useful to tell yourself. So for some, it's really personal, but here are some examples. Something like focus on one thing at a time, stick to my plan, read carefully. Because it is so personal, some students that I work with find that it's useful to think about what someone, if you, a really trusted friend, if they were sitting there with you, what would they be telling you to help you stay calm and focused? I think in every exam in multiple choice, I talk to so many students who hate multiple choice. Many things in life, if we don't like them, we can avoid them. But for exams, you just You have to find new ways to deal with it. So this is one where you do the opposite, I think. Seek out every multiple choice question you can while you're studying. Expose yourself to lots, get lots of experience with it, analyze those questions, analyze your professor's questions. So what kinds of questions did they like? Were there patterns to how they wrote their questions? Did they like fact questions or application questions? Did they like that horrible combination thing that says all of the above or none of the above? There are specific techniques for doing that you can learn. Also, multiple choice is a particularly tricky one because when we're a little anxious, we make more reading mistakes in exams. And multiple choice is precisely written to produce one response. So it's really a reading comprehension exam. So even taking a deep breath and circling and underlining the facts or rewriting things beside the question to help you process the information can be very useful. And have a strategy for when you hit a question you don't know. In every exam you ever write, even when you are the person who gets that top mark, there will be things you didn't know or that were presented in a new way. So practice thinking about that. What am I going to do? So practice your strategies with your questions when you're studying. Circle, underline, especially with numbers and symbols. We're really bad with those in exams, and negatives. So multiple choice that include negative phrasing can be really frustrating. So if you know that's something that bugs you, really look for the negative phrasing and circle it. So that's just a few techniques, but I'd recommend trying them out while you're studying and doing practice questions so you get comfortable with them, and then they'll be more comfortable when you start using them in the exam.
Perfect. That's great.
I would only say to compliment what you had said about the breath work. You wanted to do something that might be a little bit more structured is triangle breathing. And triangle breathing is essentially, we could start with 2 breaths or 3 breaths and go. So it'd be in and 2 and 3. And then we would pause and 2 and 3 for the second side of the triangle, and then exhale and 2 and 3. And this is again going to move us out of that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system, or potentially stop the ruminating of the negative thinking. And yeah, so that's what that's a nice little, so triangle, and there's also square, so you could be in for 3, hold for 3, exhale for 3, and pause for 3. If you're really feeling stress, those 2 retentions in there really start slowing things down.
And just to add to what Steve said, those are great techniques when you feel stuck. Some people say they'll say they're stuck, or they're drawing a blank, or you knew something before you came in and it's like it dripped out your ear or something when you walked into the room. It's a stress effect where the stress starts to take over, so those cognitive functions aren't the priority. So doing that kind of breathing can get you through that block or that blank that happens in an exam when you're anxious.
Yeah, that prefrontal cortex literally goes offline, and that's what it's meant to do when you're in fight or flight.
Yeah, it's prioritizing the crisis.
Yeah.
And in an exam, what you want to do is be prepared to think and make good decisions and read carefully. So they're all the higher order learning activities. And so really practicing doing those kinds of activities, those active strategies, is going to prepare you for the exam.
Great tips that you want to take into exam period with you for sure. So we'll jump into another question that we had. If you're short on time and say I'm 2 days behind my study plan, what do I do?
Okay, so I'm sure Steve will have some ideas too. What I would say is, well, there's a number of things. The first one is don't start staying up late. Stick to your sleep routine. It's really important. It'll help you manage your stress. And I'd actually rather have you study a little less and stick to your routine and not start, staying up a couple of hours late or getting up a couple of hours early. Because when you start doing that, it changes your routine, what's predictable, And you go into that fight or flight response that we were just talking about. Before you're even consciously aware of it, you're producing stress hormones that impede your ability to think and make really great decisions. And that's what you need to do in an exam. Then you need really high impact study strategies. So make a list, set a timer, 15 minutes, make a list of all the things that you feel you need to study. And then set another timer and start making concept maps or diagrams that overview the content. Prioritize the things that, say there's 4 units, but 3 of them are the most important. Focus on those and concept map them out, because it helps your brain retain the information, push information into your long-term memory, and it's more resilient in the face of exam stress. And then practice questions, lots and lots of practice questions to test your knowledge, but take lots of breaks. Take breaks every 30 to 60 minutes or every 15 minutes. It's almost like interval training, where you'll work really intensely for a little bit, take a few minutes off, work really intensely, have that very specific goal, but prioritize the most important things and get some sleep so you can read carefully, you can problem solve, you can manage the stress when you walk into the exam.
You mentioned concept mapping. Do you want to explain just a little bit about what that is?
Sure. I wish I were in a classroom and I would start drawing them. A really good way to think about it is anytime you're in class and you see a diagram, or you think 2 concepts connect and you start drawing them, that would be the start of a concept map. Sometimes they're called flowcharts, sometimes they're algorithms, sometimes they're decision trees. In many ways, it doesn't matter the label we put on them. It's a diagram that shows the relationships between the concepts. And they don't have to be pretty and they don't have to be neat. As long as you made them, they will help you understand the information, because they're showing how all the little bits and pieces fit together. And that helps you master tons of little bits and pieces of information. So you could draw one out and then flip it over and challenge yourself to redraw it. You could draw one out using all the titles in a chapter and the subtitles and sub-subtitles and sub-subtitles. And then you could challenge yourself to compare all those different titles that show up in different categories. They don't have to be big. They could be, 3 lines or 3 arrows between 3 steps in a process. It's focusing on that structure that helps us think about how the pieces of information that we're learning connect. And there's lots of fancy concept maps, and if you really love them, and some people really love them, you can go to Google and type concept map image and you'll get thousands of different versions. The most common ones for academic study are hierarchies. So they start at the top with the biggest concept and then they work down. So you have main points or the main theme, and then sub-themes beneath that, and sub-themes beneath that, and so on. And trust yourself. If you start to get overwhelmed with the size of it, it's too big, break it into smaller pieces.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to echo the importance of sleep. I mean, as the research continues to come out, so many restorative functions go on during sleep. So we're talking about the energy for one, but now becoming clear that the integration of information is like so much is happening during those sleeping hours, and so I think we can't sort of emphasize too much asleep.
And just to follow up on that, and I think it's something that's challenging for us when we're really busy, but if the exam is that stressful, unpredictable environment, and we can always do lots of things to anticipate, ask questions to reduce the unpredictability of what we're walking into. But if it's unpredictable because it's this unusual event in our lives, if you stick to your routine, you're keeping predictability and normalcy in your life. And so reducing the stress elsewhere in your life around exams is really useful.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question. So do you have any tips for when it is really hard to focus at the end of a study session? I often feel like I'm slipping when I'm close to the end of a section in a class and just want to be done.
Well, I mean, a number of the poses that we talked about, so getting physically active, grounding physically. There's some other breath work that would be really helpful, because not only can we use the breath to calibrate and calm the nervous system, but we can actually use the breath to activate the nervous system. The cells of the brain use about 3 times the oxygen and 3 times the glucose. So it's a brain's a an energy burning machine, and so there are, it's too bad we don't have them. There's a breathing technique that works with postures called breath of joy, and what it does is it allows you to take 3 kind of deeper breaths, and as you do that, I know it's a little hard, but if you imagine standing in that mountain pose, and if you imagine the first sip of breath where you brought your hands up level in front of you, the second sip you brought the hands out to the sides, and the third you brought your hands together over your head. That would be the 3 sips of breath, and then exhale with a hot type breath. That's an energizing kind of practice. So some of these yoga poses, doing some downward facing dogs, can be really energizing. Folding plank can be very energizing. And you can, again, go and Google bellows breathing or the breath of joy, and that'll give you something to sort of energize and get you through that last bit of sense.
Perfect. All right. Well, that about sums it up for our question time. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Steve and Mebby for giving us their time today to share those great tips with you. And also on behalf of the Healthy Campus Unit, I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight on the Long Night Against Procrastination. If you have any other questions or would like to get in touch with us at all, you can look us up on Facebook just by searching the University of Alberta Healthy Campus Unit page, or feel free to email us at wellness@ualberta.ca. Thanks for joining.